So mainly in this presentation, I'm going to talk about our carbon modeling work. This work mainly has been funded by a NASA Carbon Monitoring System program, also supported by our RAIN project. So before I get into the main presentation, I will introduce some elements in the carbon cycle, some basic elements, so that it would be easier to follow what I'm going to talk in the next slides. So as we know that the plants fix the atmospheric CO2 concentration in the form of carbohydrates, right, using the photosynthesis process. This carbon is referred as a gross primary production. Part of this carbon is released back into the atmosphere through the nighttime autorespiration during the metabolic processes. So the remaining carbon is stored in the plant pots, both above and below ground plant pots. This carbon is called as a net primary production. And some carbon during the growing season, depending on the cultivation practices, goes back into the atmosphere through the soil respiration. So the remaining carbon is a net ecosystem exchange. So finally, a part of the carbon moves into nearby water bodies like rivers and other water bodies through the surface and subsurface runoff and leaching. So which we call as a lateral flux. And so the remaining, the leftover carbon after we subtract the lateral fluxes, it's a net ecosystem carbon balance. So net ecosystem carbon balance is generally used to define a particular agricultural field under a given cropping system is a carbon sink or as carbon source. So if NECB, net ecosystem carbon balance, is positive under a particular cropping system, it's act as a carbon source to the atmosphere. It's positive source to the atmosphere and carbon loss to the soil. If it's a negative, it's a carbon sink to the atmosphere and then carbon gain to the soil. So this is like a brief description of the carbon cycle elements and what is exactly NECB means. So with that, moving on to the main presentation. So the main goal of this project is to develop a carbon monitoring system for croplands. So you may wonder why we need a carbon monitoring system in the first place. So mainly there are three reasons. If you see on the right side figure, there are field sites across the US measuring the carbon fluxes. But there are very few studies scaling these fluxes to a regional and national scale. But it's important we do that because there's large variation across US in terms of the climate, soils, management practices, and different cropping practices and so on. And then second reason is croplands act as a both source and sink. They lose the carbon, they gain the carbon, depending on the cultivation practices and cropping systems we adopt. So if we lose the carbon, it's not only contribute to the atmospheric CO2 concentration, but also affect the soil quality negatively, impact the long-term food production and food security. So the third reason is we know that there has been a lot of attention recently on the carbon farming, but lacking reliable metrics to incentivize the farmers to promote the carbon-friendly agriculture. So the objective of this project is to develop a comprehensive system that can allow us to estimate a net ecosystem carbon balance um, on croplands at fine scale resolution. So to develop such comprehensive system, we choose EPIC process-based agroecosystem model. EPIC stands for Environmental Policy Integrated Climate Model. So it has a many subroutines representing different plant and soil processes. So as you can see here, it has a very detailed carbon subroutine. It has a 5 carbon pools, and it can simulate the lateral fluxes. So and also vertical fluxes. So but the it's a generalized model, and we have more than 100 crops in the model. So it's really good for system scale assessment of the carbon and developing this monitoring system. But the issue is implementation of the EPIC at the spatial scale to develop a monitoring system at the national scale is very challenging, mainly because not only EPIC, all the crop models are designed traditionally to run on a particular point or a field. Meaning that if we provide all the input, soil, climate management for a particular point or a field, it runs for the field and provide the output for the field. Um, but imagine if we run at the national scale at a high resolution, we may have like a millions of pixels. So we have to run on the individual pixel. So it's really computationally very intensive. And the second is there are a lot of uncertainties to have the spatial representation of the inputs and parameters. For example, EPIC has more than 140 parameters, and we also need spatial inputs like a soil, climate, and management, spatially representative and more accurate data. So it's really difficult. Those uncertainties introduce biases in our simulations. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to address these issues. And firstly, we created a geospatial crop simulation modeling framework, and essentially we modified the EPIC model to read in the satellite data sets into the model, like crop leaf area index and crop phenology. And crop phenology is important for simulation of the crop development and also initialize the model. And second, leaf area index is very key state variable, which influence ET simulations and soil moisture simulations and the biomass simulations. So instead of model simulate the leaf area index, the model uses remote sensing based leaf area index, so that model can be less dependent on soil and climate variables, not completely, but to some extent. And then second thing, we created this high performance computing system, and the system process different spatial layers and provide input for individual pixels, and run the model with the management information parallelly, and post process all the output and create the spatial layers again. So the output is written in the model in text files. So if we run for a million pixels, we have a million text output files. So we have to post process all the output files. So running in the regular PC takes very long time, maybe a couple of months. So this high performance computing system now allowing us to run in one day, to the simulations at the national scale. So to test the performance of this our framework to develop the crop monitoring system, we implemented at the national scale uh, to estimate the net carbon balance, annual net carbon balance under corn and soybean systems. And also we did for winter wheat systems, but for this presentation, I'm just showing corn and soybean systems. We choose 2 years. One is 2012 and second is 2015. These two are two contrasting years. 2012 is a drought year, and 2015 is a normal year. So we can understand the impact of the drought on the net carbon balance. Under corn and soybean systems. So before we implement the model at the national scale, we did the calibration, taking the flux tower observations at the 9 different sites across the US, and then choose the best calibration settings for the national simulations. And these are the some of the model inputs we used in our simulations. We have in-house algorithms developed to produce different spatial data products like seasonal leaf area index and also phenology. And there are publicly available products like a Modis leaf area index and Modis phenology, but they are very coarse resolution, and also they are not crop type. They are not crop type representative estimates. So we developed crop specific algorithms and implemented at the national scale. And also we downscale the tillage practices, county tillage statistics, CTIC database, conservation tillage, I think CTIC, I didn't remember exact acronym, but they're the county tillage statistics. And then we try to downscale to the pixel scale to run the model under different tillage practices. And then we also used publicly available data sets like cropland data layer, so to extract the corn and soybean pixels to parameterize the model for those pixels and run the model. And then also we used irrigated maps, USGS irrigated maps to run the model under both irrigated and non-irrigated, conditions. So these are the simulation results for 2015 normal year for corn and soybean. Here the negative means carbon gain, like I mentioned earlier. The positive means carbon loss. As you can see on the left side, both under irrigated and non-irrigated conditions, most of the pixels were shown to gain the carbon in 2015, which is a normal year. So on the right side in soybean, even though it's a 2015 normal year, many pixels were shown to lose the carbon. It's mainly because soybean is a C3 crop and has a less biomass potential, and also non-growing season is longer than growing season. So essentially, the carbon gained during the growing season actually losing through soil respiration in the non-growing season, leaving the system as a carbon neutral or a carbon source to the atmosphere. That's the reason there are many pixels in many regions losing the carbon under soybean production. So overall, we estimated that year like 2015, normal year, if we grow corn, soybean in the US, so they're total like 500 approximately 500 teragram CO2 offset potential. So we can remove the 500 teragram CO2 from atmosphere by growing corn and soybean. But also please note that the net carbon balance we estimated also include harvested carbon. So if we remove the harvested carbon, this number will be much lower. But we don't know what is going to happen to the harvested carbon. We know that harvest carbon has a very low residence time, but we don't know where it will end up. So we still account for the harvested carbon when we estimate the net carbon balance. So this is for 2012 drought year. As you can see, both corn and soybean, many pixels losing the carbon in drought year, mainly because the productivity reduction in the annual crop productivity, which is a carbon input to the soil, and also increase in soil respiration because of the high temperatures. So we estimated that you know in drought years like 2012 can reduce the carbon or CO2 offset potential by 84%. So to understand, so yeah, the what these results mean, I mean, essentially, these results clearly demonstrate that drought had a severe impact on the carbon balance. So current cropping systems with only corn and soybean may be more vulnerable for carbon losses in the future with the frequent occurrence of the droughts with the climate change. And second is soybean alone, if we grow only soybean, it may not be climate friendly crop. in some regions of the US because of the its C3 crop and growing season length is shorter. So we need to, so in order to address this issue, like soybean being a carbon source, so we need local scale studies to evaluate alternative cropping practices like cover cropping systems to increase the annual crop productivity and reduce the growing season length. Non-growing season length, so we can make these systems carbon neutral or carbon sink. So we also performed the uncertainty analysis to understand, the biases in our estimates. We compared with the USDA NAS yield-based net primary production estimates and also flux tower observations. We compared with the flux tower observations also. And then what we found that our estimate, the simulated NPP, closely agreed with NAS reported NAS based net primary production. So we estimate the net primary production using the NAS reported yields. So our simulated NPP is closely matched with reported net primary production. Of course, we have some biases, uncertainties. The drought year we found to have more uncertainties compared to normally at 2015. And also at the site scale, our estimate showed very closely aligned with any observations. So during this uncertainty assessment process, we try to analyze what are the major source of uncertainties in our simulations. I think what we found was, I think, mainly the management practices. So we don't have like a very spatially representative management practices like tillage practices. We use county statistics, but we downscale based on National Crop Productivity Index and some other variables. But we found a lot of uncertainties in our tillage practices, and also some initial conditions with the misrepresentation of the rotation systems in our simulations. We found these are kind of some source of uncertainties. So currently we are working to improve this existing system. We have this system in place with the remote sensing products, leaf area index, crop phenology, and crop maps. And now we are trying to incorporate new products, the high resolution tillage maps and high resolution crop rotations, and also trying to see for assimilating remote sensing based, SMAP based soil moisture into our framework, whether that would be helpful to reduce some uncertainties. So these are the things we are currently working. So firstly, we try to map the tillage practices across US and Canada. So in addition to US, we are extending to Canada also in the current project. So we mapped the tillage practices using Landsat Sentinel data together at the 30-meter resolution for 4 years, 2017 to 2021. So here I'm showing just 2020 tillage estimates. And currently we are working to validate this product. And also, some of you might be familiar, we are also working on the national scale crop rotations. We use the historical cropping information and the Markov chain approach, and then trying to determine most likely rotations for every field in the US. So what you see here on the left side is most likely rotations. On the right side, you can see the probability of occurring a particular rotation in a given field. So yeah, currently we have rotation maps for 7 states and then and expanding to the whole US. I think that's pretty much in conclusions. We have a prototype carbon monitoring system in place, which can estimate the net carbon balance at very high spatial resolution, wall to wall in the US. And And some of the results from early simulations indicated that drought had a severe impact, and then we need alternative management practices like cover cropping systems. And like I mentioned, some efforts under progress to improve the existing carbon monitoring system and so on. So here I would like to acknowledge some of the co-investigators and collaborators and researchers involved in this project. So with that, I conclude the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prasad.